I have a Wolverine Sharpening System, and currently I have that mated with an old Black & Decker 3800 RPM grinder and a couple of 6-inch stone wheels. And if I'm correct, I believe they're 120 and 160 grit. It's served me well, but for a long time now I've wanted to upgrade to a low-speed grinder, and I've wanted to use some CBN wheels. And I managed to catch this 1750 RPM. It's a half-horse Rikon grinder on sale. It was at Woodcraft. And then the AAW show was this past week, and Ken Rizza from WoodTurner's Wonders was passing through, and the Ohio Valley Woodworkers Guild invited him to stop by, and they invited our turning club, the Indiana, Kentucky, Illinois Woodturners, to join them. And Ken brought everything he had left over from the show, and he talked about his sanding supplies and his sharpening supplies. And I caught an 80 grit CBN wheel for 80 bucks. That is a steal. So I'm going to make this 80 grit wheel up with this Rikon grinder, and I'll use this for shaping my tools. Now, a while back, our club ordered from WoodTurner's Wonders, and we got a deal on CBN wheels, and I had picked up a 220 grit CBN wheel. And I don't remember what I paid for this one, but the number 125 comes to mind. And we ordered a bunch of them at one time. A lot of the guys ordered, so we got a bulk discount. Really good price on these wheels. So what I'm planning to do is, I'm going to go ahead and I normally sharpen on the left side. That's where I keep my higher grit wheels. So I'm going to put the 220 CBN on the left. I'm going to put the 80 grit CBN on the right side of this grinder. And then once we get the grinder set up and working, I got a couple other little things here that we'll use, like some special washers that are designed to help keep the wheels balanced. So we're going to put all this together, and once we get it working, then I'll bring my Wolverine Sharpening System over here, and we'll figure out, because there's got to be some measurements, the height to the center spindle and different things like that. So we'll get that over here, we'll get that all mated up, and then we'll have a brand new sharpening system. And I promise you guys, once I get this set up, and once I get a chance to learn it, I don't want to throw anything out there until I get a chance to spin a few tools on this, I will do a sharpening video. I get more requests for sharpening videos than I do for just about any other video. So I will produce one. I just got to get comfortable with this system. So let's get this thing opened up and let's get her put together. What I'm pulling out of the top here, these are just the plastic shields and the bars for the shields that let you flip them up and down. There is a tool here for facing wheels, which we won't need. The CBN wheels never have to be faced or dressed. So that's just all the additional hardware that comes with the grinder. Okay. All right, and that's everything. The Rikon grinder comes with a 60 and 120 grit wheel. This is the 120 on the left, 60 on the right. We're not going to need those. They're stone wheels. We're just not going to use them. So I'll go ahead and get those off. The first thing I need to do in order to replace the wheel is to go ahead and remove these guards. There's 3 screws, and each of them has a nut and a washer on the inside. You can just grab them with your fingers. They're not on there all that tight. The front one actually has a thumb knob, so we'll go ahead and remove that. Once that's removed, you want to take a scrap piece of wood and jam it in against your wheel so that the wheel doesn't turn. The left side of the arbor will need to rotate the nut clockwise to remove it. The CBN wheels that I have, the center piece that goes onto the shaft looks like this. It's not flat like a standard wheel. So these flanges, we're not going to be able to use those. I bought this little kit and it comes with a washer. Now this washer goes on the shaft. The CBN wheel goes on next. And then I've got these little washers. You can see that this one is concave and this one is convex. We're going to get some grease. I'm going to put a little wheel and axle grease on here. We'll put these together. The holes in both of them are a little larger than the arbor, but we'll put them on, and as we tighten this down, they will slide. And as they slide, they'll lock into place. These will look like they're wobbling, but they will assure that the wheel does not wobble. One more thing I need to do with this grinder, and it didn't occur to me until a second ago when I spun the wheel, and listen to this. The wheel is rubbing, the CBN wheel is rubbing on this inside guard. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the wheel back off, and we'll remove this guard. You don't use them with this particular style of wheel. And it looks like they simply have 3 screws. Turn it that way a little bit so you can see. See if I can zoom in for you. Nope. All right, now back to my alignment kit. The alignment kit came with a regular flat washer and then of course the concave and convex washers. The flat washer goes onto the shaft, followed by the CBN wheel, and I asked the question last night, these things are not directional. It does not matter which way you put it on. Now what I'm going to do is get a little bit of wheel and axle grease. We'll pack this, get it on here, and then we'll thread the bolt on. I'm just going to use a little wheel and axle grease. Going to get a little bit of it on our finger here, and I'm just going to pack it into the concave section of this nut or this washer. All right. Once it's packed, we'll take the convex section, drop it onto the washer, slide it onto the shaft, and we'll tighten it down. And the reason for this is when you thread a nut on, the nut doesn't go perfectly flat. It follows the thread, so it's at a bit of an angle. That's what this nut does. It mashes, and you'll see in a second. It mashes, slides apart, and it realigns that. It realigns the wheel on the shaft so that the wheel is perfectly straight and not going to wobble. Okay, let me jam this over on this side. Oops. There we go. All right. Wipe a little bit of the grease off here that popped out. Now by doing that, we're ready to fire this grinder up. Made a little bit of a mess there with the grease. Get it plugged in. It was unplugged for that procedure. I want everybody to know. I'm going to try to zoom in on it and as I start it up so that you can see the wheel and the wobble or the lack of wobble. what I need to do is I'm going to loosen this nut up just a fraction, let it spin for a second, and then tighten it down, because what I'm noticing is I can feel just a tiny bit of vibration here. And well, I don't know if it's this wheel causing it, because this wheel's vibrating, or if the nut didn't slide far enough, the nuts didn't slide far enough apart to align this. You can feel the difference in them. Let me tighten her down just a little bit here. It feels really smooth on the inside of this wheel now. I can touch it with my finger and I'm not feeling any wobble. I don't know how well you can see it in the video, but the set of washers here looks like it's wobbling like crazy. It's not spinning circular. It looks like it's going back and forth. That's what we're looking for. Really nice on the side. So I'm going to go ahead now, power this off. We're going to let it slow down. And then I'm going to go ahead and tighten the nut back up, because I feel like I've got the wheel balanced the way I want it balanced. Then we'll go ahead and replace the wheel on the other side. The wheel on this side of the grinder is a traditional lefty-loosey wheel. So we're going to go ahead and jam a piece of wood in there, and we'll get this one off. Just removing the 3 screws from the inside guard. The 80 grit wheel that I bought is something new that Ken just started carrying. It has got a steel ring around the outside that the CBN material has been attached to, and the center is, I want to say nylon, but I can't remember what material he said that was. Now, this wheel will operate just like this one. The difference is he gave me a couple of these washers, and I put one of these on each side because this wheel is a little, the centerpiece or the center post doesn't stick out quite as far as this wheel, and then we'll go ahead and put a set of those sliding washers. One washer, 2 washers, and here we go. Let's get our sliding washers. I won't need to use this washer because I've already supplied one there. Got some grease packed in there, and you don't need a lot of grease, just a little bit. Slide them together, attach them, put the nut back on, and I'm going to leave it just loose for just a second. We're going to plug this in and let it spin, get everything out of the way. We're up to speed. Could you hear the vibration? And then all of a sudden it got quiet. Look how those wheels are spinning. They look fantastic. No vibration on either wheel. Go ahead and shut this down. I'll get this nut tightened. We'll clean the grease off. And we're ready to start attaching this to the Wolverine Sharpening Jig. This is my existing 6-inch grinder. I've got it mounted to a board, and I've got the Wolverine grinding jig bases mounted below each wheel. What I'm hoping to do is just disconnect the grinder, mount that grinder to this board, and I already know that these two bases are going to have to be moved. Both of them are going to be moved out just a little bit to accommodate this grinder. It's a little wider. Shouldn't be a huge issue. So we're going to do that now, and then we'll test the grinder out and see how it works with the grinding jig. The bases are mounted to the board with 3 screws in each base. I'm going to go ahead and remove them. This grinder mounts up the same way as the old grinder, so I'm going to go ahead and get it on the board. We'll snug the bolts up. We're not going to worry about getting them too tight. And once the grinder is mounted, then we can take our measurements and find out where we need to set the bases to make sure they're perfectly aligned with the grinder. Okay, it looks as if the base on this grinder is also a tad bit wider than the base on my Black & Decker. So what I'm going to do is get these holes marked. I'll go ahead and I'm not going to use either one of the holes. We'll drill 2 new holes. And the reason why is if I use one of the holes, the other one is so close that I'll end up having an oversized hole and the grinder won't be mounted tightly to the board. So what I'm going to do is slide it back just a little bit on the board, drill 2 new holes, and we should be in good shape. Also, one last thing, I need to probably go ahead and remove these rubber feet from the base of the grinder. Wants to roll on those wheels. Once we remove the feet, we're going to go ahead and put the screws back in because that's what holds this plate on that protects all of the components under the grinder. And these screws, the base has a lip on it, so the screws are going to be above that base so they won't interfere with the mounting board. With the Wolverine system, you want the front edge of the wheel to line up with the front edge of your Wolverine base. So if I want the Wolverine base to be against the front of the board, I went ahead and used this square, slid it up against the board, and brought the wheel right up to where it's kissing the tip of the square on both sides. So I feel like I've got my grinder roughly centered this way and this way. I'm not too concerned about that, but it is centered at 1 1/4 inches from the front of my board. I've gone ahead and modified a pencil so that I can fit it into this hole. And now what we're going to do is just draw ourselves a little circle down there on both sides. And we're ready to drill some holes. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to look in the instructions and find out how high these wheels need to be. And you generally measure from the center of your spindle, and it has to be so high off of the base. So I'll go and I'll measure how high it needs, or find how high it needs to be, and then I'll get it measured so that I can remove this and put the spacer below it. Hello everybody. Good news and bad news. We're going to start with the good news first. The good news is I got the bases for my Wolverine Sharpening System mounted to the board below my CBN wheels. I also began shaping a tool. Now I stopped because I've got a buddy and I really like the swept back grind he uses on his bowl gouge. So I'm going to contact him today and find out at what angle he sets his Varigrind jig to get that design. So that's the good news. The bad news, and it's really not that bad, as I installed the bases for the sharpening system, I never hit the play button or the record button on the camera. What I'm going to do though is flip this camera around and I'm going to show you what I've got. There really wasn't a whole lot to it, so I don't think it's going to matter all that much. But let me show you what I got. You might remember earlier in the video I talked about aligning these wheels with the front edge of the board that my grinder is mounted to. Doing that made it very simple to install these bases. Your base needs to be in line with the front edge of your wheel. Since the wheel was aligned to the front edge of the board, I simply brought the base up flush with the front of the board, and then I used my square to make sure that it was perpendicular to the front edge of the board, shot 3 screws into the jig or the base, and it was mounted, ready to use. I also picked up this Raptor 2-inch measuring gauge, and what this is good for is when you use the Varigrind jig, you can lay your tool right up against this, push the tool to the edge of the jig, tighten it down, and you've got the perfect distance from the edge of your Varigrind to the tip of your tool. Lets you set it right into the pocket for grinding. For the tool that I'm reshaping, the Varigrind paperwork recommends a 23-degree angle between the tool and this little leg. And in the paperwork, they have a diagram that you can lay this on and adjust and tighten this down. I followed that diagram. I've got a 23-degree angle here. A while back, I purchased some of these little Raptor jigs, and these are great. This is a 45-degree jig. I wanted a 45-degree angle on my tool, so you put it in the pocket, and you make sure that you have 2 points of contact against your wheel. Lock your jig down, and I've got a perfect 45-degree repeatable angle. At that point, I simply place the leg of the Varigrind in the pocket, and with the grinder on, I rotate my tool left and right to put an edge on it. I'm working on sweeping back the grind on my bowl gouge. Got a little ways to go. I'm using the 80 grit wheel. I'm starting to get more of a profile that I want, and I'll come back and undercut the bottom of this so that I can get this excess meat out of the way. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you do find it useful. This Rikon grinder, as well as the 220 grit CBN wheel, they've been sitting in the corner of my shop now for darn near a year. And the informational seminar Ron did the other night, and purchasing this 80 grit wheel was the impetus I needed to get all of this stuff out of its boxes and get it put together. And man, am I glad I did. You talk about putting a quick edge on a tool. I am so excited to have this. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the video, once I figure a few things out, because I'm now using low speed versus high speed, I'm using 8-inch wheels versus 6-inch wheels, I'm going to be using the Raptor setup tools. Once I get this all ironed out, I'll do a quick video. I primarily use 3 tools. Actually, I primarily use 2 tools. I use a skew and I use a rough and gouge, but I'm hoping to start getting into some more turning using this bowl gouge. So once I get comfortable sharpening all 3 of those on my new upgraded system, I'll do a video and I will show you the technique that I'm using to put a sharp edge on all 3 of those tools. And hopefully that will help answer some questions that some of you have had, because you don't know how often I get asked to do a sharpening video. I really want to thank you for joining me in the shop. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon, and have a great day, everybody.